So to begin, SIF was established in 1979 with a unique mandate to manage Seychelles' UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Can you tell us a bit more about how and why it was founded and what its core mission is today?
So as you said, 1979, and that was a time when Aldabra actually came back from being before British Overseas Territory. So in 71, research station was founded on Aldabra, and I'm just thinking maybe we should go back even further, because in the 60s, during the Cold War times, there was the intention to build a military base, an American military base on Aldabra. And that was a discussion between the UK at the time and America at the time. And due to an outcry by scientists specifically, but also people who were very much concerned about the protection of that place, it didn't come to the military base being built, but the decision was, if it's so special, as you are saying and telling us now, why don't we know about anything? So that was the reason that the Royal Society then established their research station in 1971. And this research station has been going for over 50 years now. In fact, it's one of the longest research stations running in the tropics, and it's therefore quite special. So since independence, handing over, somebody had to be taking on the responsibility of the station. And that's my personal interpretation, but whenever things are being handed over into government, into ministries, they are very much absorbed and have to do everything, but not the reason why they at the time were established. So I believe there was a call that a body specifically should be established so that the research station would be run by that body. We still have to find the proof of what I'm saying in the archives, but that's my understanding from what happened at the time. So SIF being established then has been fulfilling its mandate, protecting Aldabra, and even more so studying, continuing scientific research there. But being very far away, it's a very costly undertaking. So there was a time that government could not support the operation of the research station as it was required, and was wondering what would be a better arrangement so to ensure that the station is being manned and is doing the work that should be done. And therefore, in the late 80s, it was decided that the Valideme and Aldabra should be managed by one body, Seychelles Island Foundation. And Valideme at the time already being tourist attraction, any money that would be generated, any revenues generated in the Valideme would then be used to support the running of the station. So that has been the setup ever since. And according to our assessments, it has been working extremely well. To the extent that in 2020, in fact, the SIF was also asked to take on the management of Font Ferdinand, which is also a site on Prala. So therefore, SIF is now responsible for 3 sites, Aldabra, Valideme, and Font Ferdinand. Despite, as it was said at the beginning, that the SIF was set up to run the Seychelles World Heritage Sites, it was actually set up, and it's written in the law that it should look after Aldabra only. And that's why recently the board has undertaken an exercise to re-look at the law, the decree, so that it's been amended to reflect what the operations of SIF as it stands today.
What is your relationship with the government and how closely do you collaborate on key conservation initiatives?
So in fact, the foundation existed before there was a Minister of Environment. So the Environment Department was under the portfolio of the president at the time. So we are the longest established environment organization in Seychelles and have also therefore always played a pioneering role. Now, with the Department of Environment being set up, there's obviously very close relation by SIF discussing and getting involved in specifically species actions plans. Like, for instance, the coco de mer is not only found in the Valley de Mai, but also in other places. So therefore, we are much involved as an advisory body. We are giving guidance. We are collecting scientific information, not for the sake of collecting scientific information, but for providing these to government for informed decision making. And I think as SIF can be very proud because we've been crucial in, for instance, listing the coco de mer on the CITES Appendix 3, listing the bronze gecko on Appendix 3, but also assisting government with having the information for the giant tortoise, which is the largest population in the world. So we've been providing a lot of information to government so that right decisions can be made.
And don't forget that the president appoints the board of SIF. So there is this link, if you wish. Although we're an independent organization, we still have the umbilical cord back to the government in respect of, not funding, because we fund ourselves, but in respect of the appointments to the board.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Do you have independence in your decision making, or are there areas where government policies and SIF's mission might conflict?
To make one addition to our relation to government, to the previous question, we also should say that the president is a patron of the foundation. So to continue from there in terms of our relationship to the government, I would call it like in biological terms, you have a symbiotic. I think government is having an advantage of having a body like SIF being established, but also obviously SIF is very much linked in working with the government together. So we are not in a vacuum. We are operating and collaborating with government. Now, policies generally in government are taken by stakeholder consultation. And that's another role we've been taking on. We've been an important stakeholder, or we are an important stakeholder in the environment sector, and make sure that we are voicing out our concerns so that these are being reflected in the policies. So I give you an example, coral reef policy, coral reef restoration policy. So we will provide the information and review policies also so that our stand is reflected in these policies.
You mentioned that you are self-funded, and you also mentioned Valley de Mai. Could you elaborate a little bit more about your funding?
So the Valley de Mai is the most visited natural site in Seychelles. So we are getting about 30% of the visitors coming to Seychelles. And we do have an established visitor management system in place. So all the revenues that are being collected, be it by entrance fees, be it buying souvenirs, or making use of the services of our cafe and any other facilities, help us to generate the money that we need to operate Aldabra. That's a large chunk. We are talking about 80+%. but also Aldabra is being visited by smaller cruise ships. So we are not talking about the cruise ships of the 2,000, 3,000, but rather passengers between 80 to 200. The largest I recall was 400 people, and we do have a policy how many people can come ashore. So it should not be more at any time more than 100 visitors, and all visitors are in the company of SIF staff. So Aldabra is also generating funds via tourism. So tourism is the main sector that is contributing to our operation. But we also apply to the EU for funding. We are applying to any donors that we can align ourselves with, and we would fulfill their aims as well. There is SECAT, is the Climate Trust Fund that was established, where we've been also obtaining funds from. So there is a source of tourism operation and project funding. That's mainly our revenue sources.
So I'd like to dig a little bit more into Aldabra. I would love to find out more about SIF, but today, since our time is limited, I'm going to dig right into it. So Aldabra is often referred to as one of the world's greatest national treasures by figures such as David Attenborough. Could you elaborate on why it's so globally significant and what makes it unique?
In UNESCO language, we talk about the OUV, which is an outstanding universal value. So why it's so unique to the world. And it is meeting, in fact, three criteria why it's been fulfilling the criteria of being a World Heritage Site, why it's so special. And one of the criteria is the many endemic species that live on the atoll, and mainly the giant tortoise population, as I mentioned before, which is the largest in the wild living population. So even so, the Galapagos has been known for the giant tortoise. In fact, we have at least over 10 times more giant tortoises, and in the context of Seychelles, we have more giant tortoise than population, people living in Seychelles. In addition to endemic species, it's also protected because this is a place where we have very little impact, direct impact by humans, and therefore ecological and evolutionary process can continue without interference. And this is extremely important because there are next to zero places on our planet where this still is possible. And so it's a living laboratory. So, and apart from the ecological processes, it is one of the places that is also shown us and is proof to, if you protect nature, that nature is going to take care of itself again and it's going to bounce back, which I think is still something which specifically in the West we are having difficulties to understand, because all of the places we see are not at the minimum to what they used to be. So coming back, bouncing back, this is something extremely special, and what we have to continuously to afford to places like Aldabra.
Thank you.
Which has been described as the Galapagos of the Indian Ocean. As you might have read, we prefer to call the Galapagos the Aldabra of the Pacific.
It's our jewel, isn't it?
It is.
So Leonardo DiCaprio's foundation donated $1 million as part of the Debt for Nature Swap initiative that helped establish SECAT. While SECAT manages these funds, there's public concern about transparency and effective resource distribution. How does SIF perceive the management of these funds? Do you feel they adequately support long-term conservation? especially with challenges like the current Assomption development project?
So SECAT is in existence now for 10 years, and it has a whole suite of aims that it's trying to fulfill. And funding is being allocated to the different objectives, but also funding, like you just mentioned, comes from sometimes very specific foundations who want to contribute to very specific aims. So therefore, funding does not go always equally to all and every of the goals. So SECAT is being managed by a board, and it happens that I was involved in the discussions to think how to set up such a trust fund, and was involved in the stakeholder discussions to the extent that I was also one of the first directors on the board. And I'm still involved with SECAT, but as an observer. So in terms of governance, there has been a huge effort to have a board and to be transparent, to have stakeholder input, but also to be transparent. Now, what does it mean to be transparent? I think all of us, we perceive transparency differently, but at the end, it's about knowing how these funds are being used and what the impact of these funds has. And SECAT has engaged in several processes so that this is available, that information has been available. But you know, there are so many information available, and really to get to the right report at the right time, to get that answers, I think this is the challenges of our time. Information, we are in the age of information, but to have the information we are looking for in itself, I think that is something which all organizations can improve on. So I believe that SECAT is striving towards being a fund that is going to address the needs of Seychelles. And that is what is being put forward by the board as well.
So Seychelles has multiple environmental NGOs and associations that receive both local and international funding. Why do you think they have been so silent on the Assomption development, considering all the environmental concerns to a UNESCO World Heritage Site?
Now you're asking us to speak for others, so that's a difficult one.
I just wanted to know if you had any thoughts about it. If not, that's okay.
Well, I have a thought, but it's only my thought, and I assume that the other NGOs are thinking, well, this is SIF's baby. This is SIF's neck of the woods. SIF must take the lead on this one. So let's wait to see what they do before we step in. I suspect that it's nothing more than that.
Maybe
So,
just to add
yeah.
something as well, and something what we have realized throughout the process, specifically in relation to the Assumption development, is also that that the outer islands in itself are still, you know, a book with many question marks for many people. So it's we are very passionate about the environment, but what is it really what we are protecting in these places where it's not straightforward to get to? So I think that also plays a certain role in it. And therefore, SIF stepping up to advocate and to bring that information forward, I think has been very important.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and I think it needs elaborating. You see, the islands are a long way away, and most Seychellois do not know them because they are so isolated, because they are so expensive to get to and so difficult to get to. So if something were happening on their doorstep, on the average person's doorstep, I think they'd be a lot more engaged. But this is really a long way away, and it's a whole remove from what is happening. And then, of course, it's abstract, isn't it? There is a hotel being built on a stretch of beach, and the threat is totally in the abstract. If you had an iconic thing, like the blue whale is going to die if you do this, or tigers are going to die or be depleted, or the giant tortoise, which is what I think led initially to the preservation of Aldabra against the military base back in the 1970s, because it was an iconic species. I mean, there were lots of species, but the iconic one was the giant tortoise. People can relate to that. Whereas on Assumption, I don't think there is that that one thing that draws everybody's attention. And I think that's possibly why it doesn't garner the attention that we would have expected it to have.
I would have thought that one thing would have been Aldabra, the whole ecosystem of Aldabra.
Yes, but the Aldabra ecosystem is very nebulous as a concept. And people, the average person doesn't deal with concepts. The average person deals with, this thing is going to die, or this thing is going to be affected. The Amazon forest is going to be burned. Much more direct. And we had that, we had, even amongst ourselves, on the board, that discussion. How do you process the fact that something happening on Assumption may have an effect on Aldabra? It's clear that it may have an effect, but when you actually dig in and you think, well, what is that effect going to be, and how certain are you about the effect? You then enter into the realm of possibilities, and people don't deal with possibilities. Scientists do, but the average man in the street doesn't. I think there needs to be something a lot more direct. You have to join the dots in a way that everybody sees it for it to have the impact.
SIF has publicly opposed the Assomption development in its current form. Could you explain your stance and the specific concerns that led to this opposition? What are your thoughts on building a hotel so close to a World Heritage Site?
Do you want to take that one? I can add.
The issue is not a hotel close to the World Heritage Site. If we go and look and compare with other World Heritage Sites, for instance, the Great Barrier Reef, you have tourism operations within the Great Barrier Reef. You have establishments within the Great Barrier Reef. So the issue is not the activity in itself being so close by, but it's the nature of that hotel, that development as it stands at this point in time, and what it means in terms of the impact it's going to have on Aldabra. So this is why we are very much concerned. We've been operating for over 50 years in nowhere, in the middle of nowhere. So we know having a neighbor is going to be, in fact, a good thing. Whenever you have a neighbor and you can run to and ask for a cup of rice when you are running out, that is of assistance. So any neighbor, a neighbor is important to us, but it is a type of neighbor, and we are selective because it's a World Heritage Site and because of the impact a neighbor is going to have. So we are dearly wanting to have a neighbor that is going to help us with our operations.
Yeah, we've always wanted to have the neighbor. We've always wanted Assumption to be more accessible to Aldabra than it has hitherto been. It's close, but it's still a 2-hour boat ride in difficult circumstances to get, and not always possible. So it's very close, but yet very far in that respect. And it really is the size and activity of the neighbor that is, I think, of importance in this case. The CEO has spoken of the Great Barrier Reef. Well, you have 1,000 miles of Great Barrier Reef, so you can have some tourism activity on some parts of it without affecting the whole thing. There's only one Aldabra, and that's the issue. There isn't a second chance. So that's why we have to be extra careful as to what is placed next to it, what our neighbor does, so that we are not affected. And I think that is the issue, and that is why we have taken the stance that we have, because after a lot of assessment, I think we came to the irresistible conclusion that the current development in its current scheme is not appropriate to the fragility of the ecology of both Assumption and Aldabra, but also of the Aldabra group as a whole. So it's not the activity per se, it's not the fact of having a neighbor, it's not the development, but it's the size and the scheme as it currently is. I think that is the worry.
How have you engaged with UNESCO about this development and the issues surrounding it? Would you mind sharing the feedback they have provided so far?
So we had some informal discussions with UNESCO, but we have not received any letter whatsoever directly. We did not have any direct communication that has been sent to us. So it's been sent to the president, that's my understanding, as well as the Minister of Environment, who in fact are the authorities and the communication channel of UNESCO.
Okay. Is that standard procedure for UNESCO? How do they usually get involved in these matters?
UNESCO does have, Seychelles does has a permanent delegate at UNESCO, and that is normally the ambassador that is in France. So in our case, it's Ambassador Thiron, who's there at the point in time. So that is the official communication channel.
The environmental impact assessment for the Assomption Island Hotel development has been a point of public discussion. Could you describe the extent to which SIF was consulted during the EIA process and how your input was incorporated, or if any concerns were raised by SIF?
So when the hotel the concept of the development was presented, we were invited as well, so as a stakeholder, and we did to that meeting. And in the meeting, we raised the issues we found at that point in time important to discuss. There was no mention of the back of house. When you have the hotel, there is a villa and so forth, but there's also how the whole operation has been supported, though there was no mention of it. We discussed biosecurity, which has been coming up over and over again. We've been also looking at the tourism operation itself. So what is going to be the activities of these people who are the visitors there? So yes, we were involved in the first meeting that was held, and then there was a second meeting, which was a public meeting, to which we also went and also engaged and also expressed our support to make known what our concerns are, specifically in terms of biosecurity, and also to make sure that all our concerns are known so that they can be taken into consideration. We made that publicly, we stated that publicly. And so that's then the environmental impact, the start of the environmental impact assessment is what is called the scoping exercise. So that's what I just described. There's consultation, and this consultation then picks up what maybe the consultant has not considered at the time. And then a report is being compiled. So following that report, we, of course, we have to did a validation of that report and submitted all our issues to the Minister of Environment. Following from there was also a biosecurity consultant being appointed, and we contributed to the selection of the consultant because we provided a set of people where we felt the expertise would be there to deal with development of that size. And we met with the consultant as well to bring forward our concerns. So we've been, according to us, very active in the whole process.
Who was the consultant?
The consultant is from New Zealand, not the environmental impact consultant, but the biosecurity one is from New Zealand, and I've forgotten the name now, but
Mr.
it's
Corson. Pete Corson.
Pete Corson, yeah.
Michelle Murray's latest documentary, have you seen that
On SBC.
on SBC? The one about Assomption, the development?
The Grand Reportage.
The Grand Reportage.
Yeah.
She revealed satellite imagery showing an airstrip construction on Assomption before official permission was granted. I was curious to know if SIF was aware of this, and if so, was there any action that you could have taken to stop it?
So Assumption is sort of the bus stop to go to Aldabra. So we were informed that tourism development is being considered, but we were not informed about the necessity of looking at the airstrip and doing any construction at the airstrip. So these things happened very much in parallel. So, and it was in fact the first time we were fully aware of the extent of that air construction was in April, when the board actually traveled to the AGM. So that's when we saw that for the first time. But the EIA process had already started for the development.
Was there something you wanted to add?
No.
So the developers are marketing the project as the Aldabra Islands, using the prestige of a UNESCO World Heritage Site for their personal branding. How does SIF feel about this, and does it risk undermining Aldabra's global reputation?
We are very concerned about that imagery is being used, which is clearly Aldabra imagery. Also imagery of photographers with whom we had agreements, not necessarily photos we've taken ourselves, but photographers we've been working with without asking these photographers for permission. But I think we all have had our experience with how China is going into the trade. So it's not Nike, but it's Nike, or it's, so it is, the devil is in the detail. So for us really to take any legal steps, so to say, would be a huge undertaking, because it is done at very professional level, which is over and above what we as an organization who is not in marketing actually can gauge ourselves with. So, and I think there's been specific care taken that it's not straightforward to contest the marketing and the way it's been branded. So that's from what we've seen so far. It doesn't mean that this changes, so we don't know in which direction this is going to go. Now, in terms of whether it's going to undermine the status of Aldabra, I mean, when you're showing imagery of a very special place with little human impact and so forth, and it's been portrayed as a wilderness, in that context, I cannot see how it's going to undermine at this point in time, but it all depends how this imagery is being connected to something else in the future. So it's that's a lot of speculation here, I think.
Yeah, I think, but the one thing that is obvious is that this is a misrepresentation.
Yes.
There is no such thing as the Aldabra Islands. There is Aldabra and there is the Aldabra group of islands. Mm-hmm. And I think the tweaking of the name was intended clearly to link Aldabra to the development on Assumption. And that we find, while we can't do anything about it, because Aldabra is there and exists, and it belongs to humanity, we feel that in terms of the advertising, there is a clear misrepresentation. And of course, guests coming to Assumption down the road who might have relied upon this advert and finding out that there is no automatic link to Aldabra may complain. That's up to the Assumption project to deal with. But we feel clearly that it's using the name Aldabra. I mean, everybody knows Aldabra, fewer people know Assumption, for purposes which are not aligned to Aldabra. And if they were aligned to Aldabra, well, we would have liked to have been part of the discussion and to find out where we fit within the whole scheme. And it really is, I think, that is one of our complaints, that all of this is happening on our doorstep. But because it's happening on another island over which we have no jurisdiction, we are only fed as little information as we need to know, and we are not really part of the discussion leading up to the development or the development itself, which is what we would have wished. And if we had been part, right, from the creation of the extension of the runway, for instance, that sort of thing, we are sure that we would have been able at an earlier stage to have managed the development in a much better way and in a more symbiotic way. What is happening now is, as we have said several times, is because all of this has happened without our input. When we bring something to the table that is important, everything has got to be retrofitted back to, take our concerns into consideration, whereas that isn't how it should have been. We should have been there from the beginning, in our view, for the reasons we have given, all through. And that is a matter for regret.
We have heard from various members of SIF working on Aldabra that they feel unable to speak openly due to pressure from the government. Reports indicate that a few staff members were instructed not to take footage on Assomption Island. We were curious as to why this might be the case, because we were under the impression that Assomption is a public island owned by Sichoa.
I think that in the case of being on Aldabra, where you are, so to speak, stuck on an island and you are depending on transport that is provided by one company, and the company is also managing Assumption, and then having to understand that the flight schedule is not being confirmed because there are still discussions between SIF management and IDC. I think as a staff member, when you don't know when you are coming off from that island, because there seems to be some
lack of clarity.
Lack of clarity, thank you. So you obviously are getting worried about what is going to happen, and is it linked to that development, and it's probably better I'm not getting involved in that, because at the end there is so long I can stay on that island. So I can completely understand that some staff feel that way. This is unfortunate,
Yeah.
but there's been never any communication saying that you're not supposed to get engaged in whatever.
Taking pictures and videos?
No.
Okay.
No.
That actually leads into my next question, which is, does SIF's reliance on IDC for access to Aldabra create a conflict of interest that may compromise conservation priorities?
I wouldn't say so,
I think
because
the answer is no. No, it doesn't. I mean, of course, we're dependent on IDC, and that is not always smooth. But we are where we are, and no, I mean, I don't think we have shrunk at any point from saying what we feel is correct and what we think should be done, simply because we are dependent on IDC for transportation and transit to Aldabra.
Do you think that it could lead to a conflict of interest or certain restrictions down the line with this development in mind?
I can't see it. I don't know whether the CEO can. I can't see it, and I would like to think that there will not be. But who knows? We are not aware of the ins and outs of the development, except from what we hear and what we've been told. We know a little bit more than the average person in the public because we've been engaged in meetings directly with IDC and other stakeholders. But we don't have the full picture.
Thank you.
I just want to give you an example. As the foundation being responsible for the management of Aldabra, biosecurity being one of the major threats to Aldabra, we actually years ago decided that we should have our own supply boat twice a year instead of hitchhiking and paying for the ride with IDC when, for instance, Assomption and other islands are being provided. And this is very costly. I mean, one supply boat is costing us over 1 million rupees. So we could have also rather said, okay, for the sake of financial management, we stick to sharing supply boats, but we haven't done so. I think we've always decided so that this was in the interest of Aldabra and with conservation principles in mind.
So we've just got a few questions left. I really appreciate your time. On page 58 of the ESIA, there is mention of potentially building a helipad on Aldabra to make it more accessible for guests. How do you feel about this proposal? Does it align with your conservation mandate?
In terms of a helipad, there has been no further discussion with the developer at this point in time. So if this is something that would be wanted to be pursued, that's something which would need direct discussions between SIF and the developer.
And the appropriate security protocol, biosecurity protocols. We can't say, yes, it would be a good idea, or no, it wouldn't be a good idea, without knowing all of these attributes.
Okay, so you haven't made a decision on that yet?
No.
No, there hasn't been any
engagement to discuss
at all.
that.
Okay. So if the development proceeds despite your concerns, what are the long-term implications for Aldabra and Seychelles' reputation as a leader in conservation? And what steps will you take going forward to make sure that the government complies with your requests and suggestions?
We've already taken certain additional measures and we've tightened our biosecurity protocol. So we have specific protocols in place to make sure that from as much as you can observe species entering Aldabra, that this is not going to take place as much as we can manage these. So this is already in place, and we've been working on it. And there are certain species when we know that these are traveling around now, that we are specifically looking out for these. So that's from our side what we've been doing. And this is what we can do actively at this point in time, I believe. And then in terms of the development itself, at the end, SIF has also the mandate to on access to Aldabra. So this means there would need to be direct discussions with SIF how access to Aldabra would be happening for any visitors, and what would be the measures in place if visitors would come to Aldabra, for instance. So I think there's a lot of things in future that still need to be fine-tuned and which are difficult to discuss at this point in time because we don't know how they are going to be, what the plans are, as we said for several times now. In terms of the reputation, Seychelles' reputation, I think it really depends a lot on how all the stakeholders who are involved with this development are working together and upholding the principles and conservation principles in Seychelles.
Yeah, and I think the scale of the development is of course important. At this point, we assume that the development is going to go ahead as planned, and I'm not sure that that is an assumption we can make right now. I'm hoping that there will be at some point some scaling down. Whether that will be sufficient scaling down to satisfy us or the other environmental stakeholders or not remains to be seen. But I think our first priority, certainly at SIF, is to keep opposing the project as it currently stands in the hope that it is scaled down. If it is scaled back, then of course the next issue will be to what extent it is scaled back and what additional biosecurity measures, as the CEO says, we need to put in place to ensure that Aldabra is still protected. So it's very much up in the air still, which is why we, at this point, we are still, as it were, at ground zero. We are opposed to the project in its current form. Once we are told, well, it's going to go ahead in its current form anyway, which we hope will not happen, but if we are told that, then of course we are going to have to consider in terms of extra biosecurity measures that might need to be taken, if any, but also other avenues that we may want to pursue to push back some more. But that's down the road. At this point, we are committed to ensuring that our voice is heard and that the project is reconsidered. That's where we are right now.
Okay, thank you for clarifying, because I was under the impression from watching the president's latest interviews that he had said this project is going ahead no matter what. So I just wanted a little bit of clarification around that.
Well, until it is, we hope that it isn't.
But the construction is still taking place on the island at the moment?
I think some measures are being taken to transport construction materials there and to set out. But until we see foundations dug for 37 villas, we live in hope that the situation will not be that. Not be that.
So just to wrap up, what key message would SIF like to share with the Seychellois people and the international community about the importance of Aldabra Atoll and the need to balance economic development with environmental protection? How can citizens actively contribute to safeguarding this unique natural heritage site amidst the challenges you're facing at the moment?
Do you want to take a stab at that?
Aldabra is one of the last living laboratories on this planet. And environment protection should not be a luxury. Environment protection is the number one step so that we, Seychelles, and any humans can live on this planet. So our message is that the last living laboratories have to remain laboratories for advance of knowledge, which will be required for securing our future on this planet. Seychelles can contribute by keeping Aldabra where it's been for many years, and that's been in the heart of every Seychelles. It's always been the dream destination, the place where everybody wanted and wants to go to. So if Seychelles remain Aldabra in their hearts, I believe that is the very first step to protect Aldabra.
Thank you. Is there anything we haven't discussed that you feel the public, you would like to tell the public about SIF or Assomption?
Well, I'd like to say the following thing. The tension that exists between development and protection of the environment has been with us forever, and it will remain with us. And it is, by and large, a tension that we have managed very well in this country. There are lots of developments in sensitive areas that have been done sensitively. So it's not as if we don't know how to do that. That said, there is only one Aldabra, and there are many sites for luxury hotel developments. So it is not absolutely essential, in my view, for there to be the current luxury development on Assumption because of the uniqueness and the fragility of Aldabra. That is one place where that tension has got to be managed a lot better than it has been hitherto. So that is why we feel that with a bit more support from everybody, and your organization is one of them, we can get the message to as many people as possible so that they can join SIF in asking the government to reconsider the development so that we can end up with something that is compatible with the protection of Aldabra, so that we can continue as a country which manages the tension between development and environmental protection reasonably well. We can continue in that line and not, as it were, sacrifice everything that we have done so far in that line for this one project. I think if everybody understands that, then we can end up with a synergy that will satisfy everyone.